Hi guys, my name is Borodante, and last week Unreal Engine updated to version 5.4, so let's talk about that. I actually wanted to make this video for a while now because I was testing it in the preview version of 5.4 that was available for like 3 weeks or something, but by the time I finally got to do this, it already released in its full glory. Not that I noticed a lot of the difference between the preview and the final version here. The biggest thing I generally had an experience with here is like how to make your project to open and not be destroyed, because apparently there's a lot of updated things under the hood in 5.4. As Epic Games say, there's a lot of performance improvements on like all the aspects of nanite, lumen, shadows, and everything under the hood and over the hood, like all kinds of stuff, PCG and shader compilation, everything was improved. I have yet to see that in its actual proper form, but just as a heads up right away, in this video I won't be able to show you guys the actual performance because I have both versions of Unreal Engine open at the same time on this laptop. But yeah, I just wanted to compare a few things that especially like mattered to me the most. So this video is not gonna be covering like all the stuff and like showing them actually. We'll just go through maybe a few key points from the Epic Games website, what I'm excited to try in the future, but right now, as I launched it and as I tried it, a few things were a huge help for the level that I already have right here. And as I said about the performance, I seem to have some kind of new like swimming stutter on the CPU side. I don't know if it's showing through on a 30 FPS video, but there's like a little like swimming thing, not an actual like low frame rate, but it's like jumping up and down a lot. If you have a look at the numbers of the FPS on the right side of the screen, you can see that like the first digit, like the tens of the FPS, sometimes jumps down, and we have even orange numbers sometimes. But mostly it's like 40 plus in this particular case. Again, the overall performance doesn't matter exactly, but the fact that it dips sometimes down to the orange numbers from 40 plus, orange means it's below 30, so it's going from like 45 to like 25. At a certain fraction of a moment, and that's like a weird stutter that happens like every second or something. I had to change certain things when I was re-entering the project here, so maybe I need to change more to see what's up. But yeah, for now I can't tell if the performance is actually getting better or not. I hope so, I hope it is, but if it is better, it's probably mostly on the GPU side or on CPU side if I make it work correctly. So yeah, on the performance side, can't really tell much yet, except for the fact that I'm having an issue. But one cool thing I'm really excited about, and something that I already had fun with in the preview, is the displacement of the landscape. Now, it worked before, and I made a video about it, dedicated fully to the landscape displacement in Unreal Engine 5 that was introduced in a certain version. But now it actually has proper support in virtual texture, which is a huge deal, and I think any real level in Unreal Engine game that has a lot of reliance on the actual landscape and showing like a forest or something, you really should be using the virtual texture, not just for the performance and streaming of things, but also to be able to blend objects with the landscape. And I made a separate video about that as well, how runtime virtual textures for landscape let you use this blending effect like this. So you can literally stream the texture of the landscape onto any object based on certain rules that you define in the shader. And I use that a lot, not so much on the stone, a little bit sure to not have it perfectly clean, but like if you put any rock or any kind of formation like that, you can see it's like blending in with this like noisy masking right here to blend into the landscape, so it wouldn't look completely out of place, since all the dirt and debris on the forest floor should cover a little bit of the rocks and everything. So it's a really cool feature, but the problem with that feature that we have to use the runtime virtual textures, and here they are defined defined in the actual shader of our landscape, as well as they are like these special actors that cover the whole level area, making sure we cover the whole like surface of the landscape where we need this virtual texture to actually capture itself, to be able to stream itself at any time. And in the new version, you can see right here, we have this basic color, normal, roughness, and specular channels runtime virtual texture that we used to have right here in 5.3 as well. So here it is. And also we have the height. The height information is just needed to stream things and like blend with other objects based on their vertical position or whatever. It's not a displacement map. It's a very big, like just the information of how high or low the big polygons of the landscape are located or whatever. Like, it's just a technical thing, it doesn't provide actual displacement. As well as this texture, it only has channels for the surface details, but not the actual displacement map. And I used to be hacking around that in 5.3 and before, and in my landscape displacement video, I showed it. So this is how I do it. So I blend all the landscape layers and everything, and I provide displacement with special extra things, and I plug it into the specular channel of this runtime virtual texture because I don't really need it. I can use everything at specular 0.5, but I use the channel of specular to stream the whole displacement data and plug it into the displacement. So specular goes right into displacement. And there's a lot of problems with that because displacement needs its own type of data. Like a simple black and white texture of specular probably has certain color banding and different optimizations that won't look that good with displacement. And yeah, if we look closely at what the displacement actually looks like, it looks like complete trash. It's very noisy. With the world partitioning, there's even more issues with this whole texture alignment. It looks weird. This old way of doing things had so many issues. And like the main issue is that is just the resulting detail of displacement looks that bad, simply because there was no proper way provided by the engine to how to stream displacement into the runtime virtual texture. But if we look at the new version, we have this displacement runtime virtual texture added. And it's simply this texture that has this new type of displacement. And yeah, thanks to that, I can separately define the level of detail of the displacement specifically. So we can see like the certain level of detail is pretty reasonable, especially for the third-person game. But like we can make it lower and lower and lower, or higher and higher and higher, and even higher, and it will become very detailed. You can see it still has like certain like steps. I think this is just the like landscape displacement optimization that it seems like it's like 1 centimeter steps in height. I was expecting it to be fixed to become like higher precision displacement, but maybe it's just the way it should be at this point, because I am using the proper actual displacement maps, so it shouldn't happen just because of the quality of the textures provided. So it seems like it may be the optimization of the displacement on the landscape in general, because like, you know, it's definitely good enough. It looks like real detail on the ground, unless you're like literally jamming the camera right into this landscape surface, which is not the point of the whole thing. But yeah, definitely comparing to 5.3 with this insane noise that happened here with my hacky way of providing displacement in the runtime virtual texture, this is a big improvement. And yeah, if I open the actual shader of the landscape in 5.4, we can see that here displacement goes into this displacement section. But what's interesting, you can't just use this output to plug it in here because that just won't do anything. There's no data in here because this is feeding from this texture, the color texture that still has only those old channels. And we still need those, but displacement is not included here. So instead, we feed everything into this one output from our shader logics, but displacement itself should go from this separate runtime virtual texture sample, and that's where we define the displacement map and we plug displacement into it. So that's just a little update on how to apply displacement in the landscape shader. And yeah, it looks definitely a lot more believable now. I can actually use this. It still doesn't provide like collision or anything, it's still just a visual thing as far as I can tell. Really, one thing I learned is that displacement shouldn't be approached as actual level modeling tool. It's just this extra fine detail of the surface, which is what the shader should be. We're just showing that all these details that we visualize with the color texture, that they're not just flat or like just faking the normal mapping. In here, we actually have the real protruding of these like sticks and pines and everything. So it looks pretty cool, and when it's blending with the mud in here, it looks very nice, I think. So that's a cool update that I'm really excited about, because landscape is really something you look at a lot if you walk in the forest. Another fun thing that I improved with just one switch, and I immediately tried it when I installed 5.4 preview, is the way these lights are working on John. Like, this is like the special lighting that we see on our own third-person character that we're playing. So even if we're in a very dark environment, like right here, we can still see John pretty well. So if I turn it off, it looks like this. But we always get to see how we are doing, because this is us. It kind of makes sense, and it makes the game look a bit nicer, makes the character pop in the environment. But like a special thing, special requirements about these character lighting is that these lights, they should be only lighting the character and not getting blocked by anything the character is standing next to. So you can see like the leaves of this tree in here, they're not lit by this special lighting. Only John is affected. And no tree branches or leaves are casting shadows onto John in this lighting as well. So it's completely separate worlds of how John is lit by these two lights and how the rest of the world is lit. The rest of the world is completely excluded. And in 5.3, I actually had a big issue with being able to provide that isolation of lighting. For this isolation, you should be using light channel or lighting channel. So if I select the two lights, this is how they look in the actual setup. So one light is always the rim light, another one is the key light. And both of them, if I'll type in channel, you can see they're channel 2. And then our character and all of the objects that make up his shape, they're channel 0 and 2. Channel 0 is this default channel that all the objects by default have in the world. So if you're not using channels, you're using channel 0. So including John in this makes sense, because if we are in the brighter environment, we need John to accept this lighting from the sky or whatever, but also we want to add the special lighting that's just for John. And this whole thing is great and all. It's been in Unreal Engine for some time as far as I know, but the problem in 5.3 is, for some reason, I had to make them cast ray-traced shadows in order to avoid a bunch of issues. So if I'll go back to just default virtual shadow textures that are default shadows for all the lighting in the level, which is a much more performant and compatible thing, like even if you don't have ray tracing graphics card, it should still work. So right now you can see it works fine, but if I'll go into certain areas, we may start seeing like serious flickering of shadows on John, specifically the shadows part that are cast. Oh, there it is, that's the flickering. This is only happening if I'm not using ray traced shadows in these lights that are supposed to just work in one of the channels. And I had this issue all the time, and I had to switch to ray tracing that shaved off like at least 5 frames per second, just always by looking at your character. So right now in 5.4, we can see that like it's using the default project settings, so no ray tracing, and we are using the channel 2 for the lights, and if I start playing, we will never see any flickering. It's really like gone. Finally, I never have this issue anymore. Not something they ever announced or anything. I mean, it makes sense, it's just a bug fix. pretty much. But yeah, now I get to have, like, when I will solve the issue with the stuttering of the CPU part, I will definitely see certain performance improvement simply because I'm not using the actual ray tracing shadows on the character all the time from two lights. So yeah, this will be definitely an improvement, and it's a much more stable situation. I keep feeling anxious that what if it will start flickering now? But yeah, it never does. It works just fine. So yeah, we have displacement, we have properly working lighting on the character without having to use ray tracing, and hopefully I'll see some improvement in the performance as well. So yeah, also I wanted to go through quickly some of the new features and some notes I want to share with you guys about like how to switch the project to 5.4. 3 to 4 had certain like it had huge fundamental improvements to animation and rigging. So animating tools are so much better. Character rigging is better. You can add the actual rigging, and like even vertex based weights and everything can be changed. There are modular control rigs where you can just drag and drop legs, arms, spine, and everything onto the character, and they're just set up fully without having to even write code with blueprints or anything. It's just a drag and drop thing now, which is really cool. I'll probably be able to use a control rig on like animating neonates or any enemies that are not metahumans, so that's really cool. But yeah, the amount of new features here is insane, and like there are deformers even. You can have like animated rig that has like squishing and twisting kind of controls on the character, which is so cool. It may actually be really awesome to add that to the neonates as well, because they are supposed to be squishy, kind of like egg yolk, egg white characters a little bit, but like from hell. So some of the squishiness could actually look really cool on them. And yeah, skeletal editor, like weight painting and everything like that, like you can do everything now. You don't have to prepare a rig anywhere outside of Unreal Engine. You can do it right in here. So that's quite crazy. But because of all of these improvements, I had a hard time launching the project at all in Unreal Engine, because I had, if you guys remember, in 5.3, I think I already deleted in here because I was preparing it to be exported to 5.4. I had my John for animation version. That's not the actual player character, but just a model of John that's ready to be animated. And I also had like this level sequence of John being focused. So I'll just drag and drop it in here again. And this works just fine here in 5.3. And if I hit edit on this guy, it will immediately pick up that there's animation John in the scene, and he like it will be playing that animation here. I can keep editing it. And this was here for a while, and when I exported the level into 5.4 and I was trying to open it, everything was crashing without explaining anything. And just by some deduction and by intuition, I realized that I probably need to get rid of this, because there are so many changes to the way you work with level sequences in 5.4 that maybe it's incompatible. And when I cleaned the level of all the level sequences in like actual actors inside of the level, it just opened so easily in 5.4. I didn't have to do much at all. Well, another little thing you should do when you switch to the new version, you should go into all of your installed plugins and like disable everything, because none of these will be in the new version anyway. You will need to install it again, and you may have problems with launching the project at all if it's not ready to be run without these plugins. So yeah, this is something to disable. Usually it just asks you on launch, like, this plugin is absent. Do we try to find it on the marketplace or just disable? You choose disable, it should run. So DLSS is probably still not available for 5.4. It takes some time for NVIDIA to introduce these updates, but the level sequence, I'm even showing you guys this right now in 5.3 because I actually almost lost access to my project in 5.4 again, even though it was working and was saving and everything, because I did the same thing. I placed the older level sequence actor again into the level, and it started like it was unable to run the game in the separate window, was unable to relaunch the project again, so I had to do the whole hacking around by literally removing the assets with these level sequencers, so the level would just lose it. That was the only way to recover there. So yeah, as far as I understand, the new level sequences that you create inside of 5.4, like if I would just add a level sequence into the level, it would probably work fine, but if these level sequences were created in earlier versions, they seem to be causing issues, at least in my case. So yeah, more about the animation. Motion matching is this huge thing. This is like this new way of animating a character to have like super realistic and diverse animations instead of using blend spaces, which is the thing that's been used until now. And blend spaces is like based on the speed of movement of the character. You would define specific logic, like at a 1 meter per second, the character would use this animation of like slow walking. If it's like 2 centimeters in a second, it will be this animation of like going faster or running or whatever. And you dial it in and make it work just right. And the animations need to have like steps that are synced with each other, so they wouldn't blend into an awkward switch of the phase of stepping. There's a lot of issues with that. And then like there's blend space that goes left and right, because like if your character turns, they need to also, you know, showcase this kind of movement where they show the actual movement to the left and to the right, and also with a certain speed. And there was always a lot of work of defining this like space, a two-dimensional space of like what animation the character should be using based on how the player is moving the character around. But now this whole thing has changed so much, because now you pretty much drop all of your animations. I have yet to figure out how exactly, but maybe like for specific, just for movement, in all speeds and in all directions. For instance, if it's just the walking / running, you drop all of those separate animations into like one collection, and then it's just the machine learning that is choosing the proper animations to pick up at this particular moment based on the direction and the speed, and it's also using the proper frame from that animation to have the best fitting pose of the character inside of it, so you will never have an issue of the wrong phase of stepping or anything like that. So that's really cool. I have yet to try it, but the demos that they showed is pretty amazing, and it will be really cool to see how it works with Rococo Smart Suit animations. Like if I'll be able to just provide a bunch of different bits of animation and just drop it in and see how that will show up. That's really awesome if it works very well. The tessellation is something that's, of course, not just introduced to the landscape, but also to just the materials, so you can provide displacement to anything, including tiling materials, which is not just, one separate asset that can have a lot of polygons thanks to nanite, but now you can tile walls and giant spaces with just one texture that's repeating, and that repeating texture will be tessellated and displaced. So that's really cool. And yeah, really what everyone's mostly excited about 5.4, because of how desperately we need it to be improved, is the improvement in optimization and performance. So nanite is optimized, and I will probably need to look into it. Maybe there are certain tools how to make things run faster, so that will be exciting to check out. Oh, temporal resolution has more improvements, which is really cool. I really like their idea about sample resurrection, which is a fun idea, where, just to show it to you guys real quick, I showed it before in some videos, upscaling, right? So this is 100% resolution of the game, and it's like pretty choppy here in the editor. But then we can go to 75, 65, 50%, and 50% is generally where I already reach 60 to 70 FPS in like the full detail forests right here. But we can actually go even lower, like 25. With this kind of sampling, we can see like a bunch of artifacts everywhere. But we can go even lower, and all of this looks like crazy now. But what's really cool about it is that, horrific on its own, of course, but like if we look at the floor right now, it looks like an old YouTube video from, I don't know, 2002. And if we keep looking at the floor in front of us there, and I will walk from the side, you can see these like streaks of samples that were streamed from the camera on that angle, and now we'll look at them from the side. That's what happened in 5.3 as well, but now there's so-called sample resurrection. These samples will also be recovered when I go back to this angle again. Like, it will still pick them up. And I think it's especially useful that, you know, any sample that was calculated on a certain detail, on a certain texture, on a certain object at a certain angle, it will be there for the GPU to pick up at any point where this similar circumstance shows up. That's really cool for a third-person game because the main character is always in front of the camera, so there is a lot of these samples that can be constantly picked up. It will probably minimize the amount of sampling that the temporal sampling needs to do on the character. I feel like that will be like the zone, the spot on the screen where the character is, will be like kind of optimized in terms of just this sampling. And yeah, again, just to show you guys if you haven't seen that other video, this is what 3 samples, 3% resolution of temporal sampling looks like. And yeah, it starts showing some kind of GPU fans all over the screen. I don't know why, but this hasn't changed since 5.3. Yeah, shader cook time is optimized. It seems like you have to compile a lot less shaders in the editor, but also for the final product of the game as well, as far as I understand. The whole shader compilation and like pre-compilation for the level is something I still need to dive into, and I will definitely have to, because things stutter a lot when you first launch the game separate from the editor. That's where like a separate program of the game needs to compile all the shaders, and it didn't have the time to do it before you start playing, so I was doing it right in the gameplay. So yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to cover. There's a lot more cool tools, including the optimizations and all these programmer stuff, and they look so terrifying. Also, motion graphics presets, that's for actual virtual production or just for pre-rendered animation. So instead of Blender, you're using Unreal Engine, and these are the things that are used for that. They actually repeat a lot of features from Cinema 4D, and it even looks the same with like cloners and different visual effects that you can parent to each other and everything. It works just like in Cinema 4D, it seems like. That's probably kind of scary to Cinema, because yeah, this thing is free to use to a certain extent. I know there are new payment models for those who use Unreal Engine for video production specifically, so not sure about that. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff on all fronts, and I'm really glad that there's a lot of features that are specifically for animation and in-game performance, and the stuff that I really needed. Man, this post is enormously gigantic, like a huge amount of improvements to PCG as well, including you can create like biomes or something like that, where you just define different types of plants that can show up in different areas or something, and that will be automatically populating things. It's like this whole world building thing. It's never complex enough. You can go so crazy with it. But yeah, just a huge amount of different tools, but I'm really excited about the animation specifically. Animation for the cutscenes and animations for the in-game logics with this motion matching and everything. It's really exciting. But yeah, displacement, performance improvements, hopefully, and yeah, some issues of bugs bugs with my lighting. So far, that's been my peak excitement on something I can actually benefit from right now. Displacement looking normal and everything. So yeah, looking forward to dive into it more and actually implement the animations for John using these new tools. It's really on time because I've actually captured all the different animations of movement for John, so it's all just about blending them together, and 5.4 seems like will be a huge help with that. So yeah, this is it. Let me know what you guys think. If I missed something that you think I should be really excited about right now, let me know in the comments, and yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye! So I did notice though that if I go very low samples, I do get over 60 FPS, which does mean that this is a GPU issue that I'm having stutters with. Interesting. I thought I had a different experience before. But yeah, nonetheless, this is not a normal low performance, this is like a weird stutter I'm having. Requires investigation.